Good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to another PAIT Group Joy of SharePoint webinar. Today, we are going to dive into the wonderful world of Microsoft Teams calling. I'm excited about this webinar. I hope you are too. It feels like we spend so much time talking about talking inside of Teams. We haven't talked yet about calling inside of Teams. So Richard and I decided to go to the premier experts on calling inside of Teams, and we've brought a special guest along. So stick around. We're going to be introducing Jacob here in just a moment. If we have never met before, let's see. There we go. Next slide. There it is. If we've never met before, my name is Joy Apple. Social media, I am Joy of SharePoint. I've been playing with Microsoft products and technologies for almost 13 years now. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a modern workplace strategist at PAIT Group. And I am joined, as always, with my partner in crime, Richard Calderon. Richard, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Joy. Thanks. Good afternoon, good morning, or evening, depending on where you're coming from. As Joy mentioned, we are just happy to be here delivering this new webinar here to you today. It's all centered around Microsoft Teams calling. And similar to Joy, my role is a modern workplace strategist and have been doing the Microsoft consulting thing now for going on about 20 years, believe it or not. It's kind of strange how long that's been. But nonetheless, we love all things Microsoft 365. And again, that's why we love to bring these webinars to you guys. So thanks so much for joining us. Like we always do. Oh, actually, I got jumped ahead of myself. Want to go ahead and introduce the guest that we brought with us here today. Jacob Eker from PEI. Go ahead and want to introduce yourself there, Jacob?
Sure. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Joy, for bringing me along for this fun ride that we have today. As you guys said, my name is Jacob Eker. I'm the CIO and Vice President of PEI. We're centered out of Boulder, Colorado, which I have on my background there just to show everybody what we get to see every single day. I've been working with Microsoft solutions since the late 80s or so. And so I've gotten the joy of seeing Microsoft develop from email up through Teams and the communication and collaborations. At this point, I spend a lot of time doing strategizing and planning with organizations and helping them out with their executive teams and how do they budget for these technologies. I'm a former MVP as well. So I get to play so many different fun roles playing with the Microsoft technology. It's joy being able to play with the technology and the toys that we've been able to play with over the last 20, 30 years.
Toys are fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we really appreciate taking some time out of your day to visit with us here on this webinar.
Absolutely. Glad to.
So why don't we, as always, this is where I was kind of jumping ahead, we tend to have some poll questions. So there is a link in the Q&A panel to this poll. And we're just wanting to get a general understanding always of who's who in the room. And then really it's just a single poll question here today. If you would want to respond to that, we're just interested to know when it comes to the topic of Teams calling, is your organization, yes or no, currently using Microsoft Teams as your business phone system? And so let's go ahead and see if we're getting any responses to this poll here just yet. Looks like we've got a few. So we've got some IT pros and someone from management. Thanks again for joining. And it looks like at least out of the 4 responses we have so far, 3 are no and 1 is yes. That's great. Fantastic. We'd be interested to understand how that journey into Teams as your phone system has worked out for you. But yeah, at any point in time, feel free to just respond to that poll. Just click the link in the window and then just jump right in. Appreciate that. Okay, let's jump back to slides. Jake, you want to jump in here?
Sure. So as we've seen at the beginning of COVID, Teams really has taken over the world and everybody has started using that for collaboration, whether it be for instant messaging or Teams or channels. And, it's very natural for people when they type an instant message with another person to be able to or want to escalate that into a voice conversation. And we've been able to do that when we do a peer-to-peer call or we have 2 people on a conversation. The hard part within that, what a lot of people have wanted is the ability to be able to use Teams to be able to call out to the outside world. I want to call my kid's school and find out why or not they're in trouble. I want to be able to call my doctor. I want to be able to call my significant other. And the adverse of that, I want them to be able to call me through Microsoft Teams. Right now, what we can do is if it's a peer-to-peer conversation where everyone gets a message, yes, we can escalate that to voice within Teams. If it's any of those other situations, for most people, they have to go to their phone on their desk and they have to dial that number and they have to put it out. And that makes it a little disjointed. The nice part with Microsoft Teams is we do have the ability to fold those capabilities into one platform, into the Microsoft Teams platform. It is a great collaboration platform. It is also a significant communications platform, not just for the instant messaging, but going to the enterprise voice capabilities. We do have the ability within Teams to dial any outside number we want to. We do have the capability to receive calls from Microsoft or from anybody in the outside world. And we can escalate an instant message that has 2 or 4 or a dozen people on it. We can escalate to a voice conversation with all of those same people within the Microsoft Teams. So it gives us that capability to be able to do that and to be able to function within that. A lot of people think that this capability within Microsoft Teams is new, that Microsoft is just getting into the enterprise voice scenario. And the reality is Microsoft has been a phone company for over a decade at this point, going on about 15 years. All of this started back in 2007 with a product called Office Communication Server, and went from there to Lync, to Skype for Business. And now all of that capability that Microsoft learned has been folded into Microsoft Teams. The main difference between those older versions is all of those were on-prem. Now we have moved into Microsoft providing the voice services through a cloud mechanism that we all have with Office 365. But like I said, Microsoft is a phone system in and of itself. They are regulated by the FCC. So they live by the same rules and standards that AT&T or Lumen or any other phone system has to live by. And they've been doing that for a very, very long time. So let's talk for a minute about what you get when you have Microsoft Teams as a phone system. It is a lot of what you expect out of an enterprise voice solution. You can make a call, like I mentioned. You have a dial pad. You can dial the number if you want. You could also, if it's a phone number that has something like 1-800-Microsoft, or some naming standard like that, you can type that into the dial pad and it will automatically transition that into the numbers that it's supposed to have to be able to dial that. You have a call history, so you can see all your previous calls, you can see your missed calls, you can see your voicemails. Yes, voicemail is also included as part of this. You can forward calls to somebody else in the organization. You can also forward the calls out to your cell number. I tend to use that a lot when it's 4:30 and I'm supposed to be at dinner with my wife at 5:15 and I'm running late. I'll transfer the call to my cell phone and be able to continue that call. The person on the other end doesn't know that I've transferred over to another device, so it has that capability. I can do call transfers, and I can do those as a blind transfer where I blindly send it to the next person in the line, or I can do it as a consultative transfer where I'm letting them know, hey, this is a salesperson from X organization. Do you want this to go to voicemail or do you want to take the call? And then I can transfer that call on. One thing that's a little bit different that you don't get in other phone systems is Teams voice is very flexible, meaning I can do Teams voice on a web browser. I can do it on my mobile device. I can do it on my PC like I'm doing right now with my headset. I can put it even on a desktop phone. Contrary to what many have probably heard about Teams, it does have actual phones that you can put on your desk and be able to use as an endpoint device. So that's a flexibility that not a lot of phone systems out there can really provide at this juncture. And when we think about the other capabilities that Teams has, we really are integrating that voice capability into the rest of what Teams can provide from a Teams and channels and instant messaging perspective and from a collaboration perspective. So adding that voice really is that next step to be able to get a fully functioning unified communication solution.
So Jacob, a question for you here.
Sure.
And you kind of just said it. It is that next logical step. For the deployments you've seen, right, chat probably is the first thing people do when they come into Teams, right?
Very much so.
Chat. Meetings. I always find it's fun when people are like, oh no, we don't use SharePoint Online yet. We're just using Teams, which we all know means they're also using SharePoint Online and all that
Correct.
good stuff. But when we're making this next logical step, you're chatting, you're reducing your internal email, you're starting to collaborate on files and working with your teams. What do you think is that first basic feature of those that are, well, maybe it's not one that's on the slide. What do you think is that first thing where the business user goes, okay, I don't have my Cisco phone anymore. Now I've got my Teams phone and Teams calling. Oh, that's what that means. That's what this can do for me. What do you think that number one feature would be?
Well, I think it's more not so much feature, but a progression, right? Because you're absolutely right. People start with Teams, they start with instant messaging, they see the presence. It's a wonderful capability. I can see people halfway around the world and how busy they are. I can start an instant message with them. And if our attendees are anything like me, after about 3 times back and forth of sending an instant message, I get tired of typing. I just want to talk to the person. And right now, if it's just me and another person, that's great. I can do peer-to-peer voice. But what if it's an instant message that has 3 or 4 or 10 people on that instant message? Right now with Teams, or maybe without the right licensing, without what we're talking about, they don't have that capability to escalate to voice. It becomes very cumbersome. With the Teams voice capability, I can just progress to a voice conversation with all of those people on the line. All I have to do is click that button, and it's a simple escalation to voice, right? And so now we've gone to this very rich voice communication capability. We can still instant message, we can still share the files through the instant message, but we can incorporate voice into that conversation. And then to take that progression a little bit further, the next step within that is now I can add the video on, just like we have today. But I go from instant message to voice to video to collaboration. These are all the things that we've been wanting in a collaboration tool set for many, many years. And really, I think it's come to an inflection point with Microsoft Teams that we didn't have with Skype or OCS or SharePoint or anything before this. So Teams really has brought everything together all in one place. Hopefully that answered your question, Joy.
I think it did. No, I think that totally makes sense. And I totally agree. So for our viewers at home, I got fingernails for the first time. So for the last week, I have most definitely been just clicking that call button so I don't have to relearn how to type. I mean, that's a game changer for me. I don't know about maybe you gentlemen that are joining us today. Just saying.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I don't quite have the nails to be able to deal with that as of yet.
But you could if you wanted.
I could, yes.
So the Teams basics totally makes sense, right? It's that progression from the collaboration to actual being able to talk and speak. But I know what slides come in. It's the scary slide, right? How does this work from a licensing perspective?
From licensing, this is actually one of the benefits that Microsoft Teams provides, because when we think about a phone system, whether it be Cisco, ShoreTel, any of the other phone systems out there, first we have to have some hardware. And I'm not just talking about the phones. I'm talking about the PBX. I'm talking about the gateways, all the components that come into it. Hosted voice systems are a little bit different. Yes, they need internet, but typically if we're having on-premise, we have hardware, we have some software, we also have phones that comes into it, we have licensing that comes into it. It gets to be pretty cumbersome. With Microsoft Teams, it's really pretty simple. We have to have a Teams license, which hopefully everybody has already. We have to have a phone system license, which is really the PBX functionality that we get. And you have to have a domestic or an international calling plan. And when we talk about that, there's 2 plans. Domestic plan gives you 3,000 minutes per user per month, and that is grouped together for everybody within the organization. So if I have 100 users within an organization, that means I have 300,000 minutes per month for the organization as a whole. So that's the domestic calling plan. The international plan, it still has the 3,000 minutes, but it also adds on 600 minutes of international calling capability. So you have your phone system license, you choose a domestic or an international plan for each of the users, and you are really ready at that point to be able to move forward. I do want to say, as far as licensing, there's a lot of people out there that have the business plans, whether it be business standard, business premium. And it used to be that if you wanted enterprise voice capability within Microsoft Teams, you had to be on an enterprise plan. That has changed. Microsoft introduced the business voice add-on, which can go onto either the business standard or the business premium. It's $20 per user per month. You get the phone system license, you get audio conferencing as part of that as well, and you get the domestic calling plan. So it's all included within that. So whether you're on the business plans or whether you're on the enterprise plans, you have the capability of doing voice. And that's it as far as licensing. Once you have that in place, you can start using Teams as a voice solution. There's really nothing else that you need. You have your Teams client already. You can use that. Maybe you want to get a headset. Maybe you want to get some sort of endpoint device, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's all you need from a licensing perspective to be able to use Microsoft Teams as your enterprise voice solution.
And Jake, just for clarity on that there. So when you have Teams without any of the phone system licensing, you can make calls to other Teams users over Teams, right? So I don't have to have the phone system licensing or any of this stuff. But when I want to get that 10-digit dial pad that I can use now to be able to dial out, or for someone to be able to call me from, my kid's school or whatever at my work desk number, then you have to have a phone system license for Teams. And then I think you said it, but the calling plans, it depends, right? If you want to use Microsoft as your PSTN provider, then you use those calling plans from Microsoft. But you can also use your own kind of direct routing. Is that right? How that works? Or
correct. So, and we'll definitely talk about direct routing at another point, because that can be and it will be a conversation in and of itself. Yeah. But if you have a long-standing relationship with a SIP provider, or you're tied into a PRI or something like that, and you can't go to Microsoft being your SIP provider, or you just don't want Microsoft to be your SIP provider, there are other alternatives like direct routing to be able to use another SIP provider to be able to provide the voice services. So you do not need to have a domestic or international calling plan if you are using something like direct routing. But if you want Microsoft to be your SIP provider, to be your phone company, then you do need a domestic or international calling plan for each individual.
Great. So if you had a existing service provider and we're not planning to use Microsoft's calling plans, but now you want to use Teams as your phone system, and let's say my phone number is, it's printed on my ancient, business cards that I've got thousands of them in a box and whatnot, and I don't want to have to change to a new number. What are the options there?
Sure. So the easy thing is we do not need to get a new number for everybody. Microsoft recognized that people have had numbers sometimes 20 years, and if it's like me, I have my business cards in every fishbowl trying to get a free lunch somewhere in the world. I want those numbers to be able to reach back to me. The nice part is with Microsoft Teams, we can keep those numbers. We can keep the main business number. We can keep the number tied to every user. We can, if you have what's called direct inward dial or a DID block of say 100 or 1,000 numbers, you can keep all of those. You just simply need to port those to Microsoft. Microsoft then becomes the voice provider for you once you port those numbers over. And once they're ported, then we can assign them back. We can assign them to users. We can assign them to service numbers. We can use them for whatever purpose that you want to use them for within your business. So we absolutely can do that. You can, of course, still get new phone numbers with Microsoft. Okay, once you have that phone system license, you can get new phone numbers. It does not cost anything extra. It's included within that phone system license. So you can request and you can get phone numbers really within a matter of a day, sometimes within about 4 hours. And you can get a phone number pretty much in any area that you're in. Like I'm in Colorado, we have 303, we have 720, we have 970, we have a new one that's coming along. You guys all know that some area there's competition for getting those old numbers. Like 303 is very, very hard in Colorado to get, but 720 is very much available. I may not be able to get a 303 from Microsoft, but I can definitely get a 720. If it's available, Microsoft will give you that phone number in whatever region that you're in, whatever locale that you're in, and it will be a local number for those users. So I have users in New York, they have a New York number. I have users in Los Angeles, they have Los Angeles numbers. Colorado, of course, we have users that have Colorado numbers. So you can get any one of those area codes and be able to provide that. And Microsoft supports that. So whether you want to port your existing number blocks over or whether you want to get new numbers, Microsoft has that capability.
That's great. It sounds like it's not too dissimilar from, you know, your mobile carrier has been AT&T for however long, but you just kind of tired of their service or whatever it is, and you know, decided to switch to Verizon, then you might go over to Verizon. They could port your number over from AT&T. So same idea here. That's great.
Same concept, same idea. Keep your numbers, keep your business cards. Make sure that whatever prize you win in a fishbowl, you're able to receive the call for.
Awesome.
So let me show you. Yeah, let me show you what's missing from most of the teams if you don't have a phone system license. So bear with me for a second. All right. So Teams client. Hopefully everybody is used to Teams client. We have our activities, we have our chats. What most people don't see is this button right here. And Microsoft,
I don't think you may need to reshare.
Is it not sharing? Okay, bear with me.
Oh, here you are.
How about now?
Yes, that looks fantastic.
Perfect. Okay, so again, Teams client. We have our chat options, we have our teams and our channels. But this button right here may be missing for a lot of people right now. And this is because they don't have that phone system license. The minute you have a phone system license within your tenant, you'll start seeing this button show up. And this gives us access to our dial pad. It gives us access to history. So this is everybody that has called or that I have called over the last, 3-4 days. You have your speed dial capabilities over here. I can click on any one of these people and be able to dial them. Also notice that you can see just specifically the missed calls that came in. You can see all your incoming calls. Important button right here. I won't have anything in here because I get rid of my voicemails pretty quickly. But any voicemails that you have saved will automatically be showing here, and you'll be able to play the actual voice message. But the nice part also is within the voicemail, you'll have a voice to text translation. So it is something that can be searched within Teams. It can also be searched within Outlook if you have that open. So your voicemails become a searchable context, which in most phone systems, it's not a capability to be able to do that. But if I want to dial somebody's number, if I want to call Microsoft, I don't have to translate Microsoft into what the numbers are. I can simply put that in and I can click call and it will dial that out. Notice also down here, I have options for what I want to do. If I want to forward all my calls to voicemail, I can do that. I can also go into more settings and I can set up different groups within this. I could set up a call group and therefore I could ring my phone for, let's say, 10 seconds, and then it would go to a group of people to be able to ring after that if I wanted to. That's from a personal perspective. But there's a lot of capabilities in here, whether we're doing the call forwards or whether we're doing simultaneous ring capabilities within that. So this option right here gets turned on once you have that licensing. And like I said, for a vast majority of people, they probably don't even know this exists because they may not have that licensing that makes this button available. So another thing to show, since I'm in here, one thing that comes up very often. Everybody's been to a website, the number's been up here at the top, right? Mm-hmm. And if you click on that, it doesn't do anything because you have a separate phone system that's not tied into Microsoft Teams. If I click on this number, notice here, it's going to automatically click to dial within Microsoft Teams. And this is, again, one of those features that Teams Enterprise Voice capabilities gives you, is the ability to do a click to dial. Is that a big deal? No, we've all gotten used to taking the number from the screen and typing it into the phone itself. That's okay. But if I can save a few seconds of time just by clicking and going into Teams and having it dial, that's again one more benefit to the end user, and it makes it that much easier for them to be able to use.
Yeah, that's nice. That's convenient. From speaking as a dyslexic person, that's actually a massive time saver for me.
Yeah, very slick.
Especially with the nails.
Exactly.
So while you're demoing, we did get a couple of questions, if now's a good time to along the way.
Absolutely.
So from some of the earlier discussions, Susan asked, can we integrate with Cisco systems?
You can actually. So we talked a little bit earlier about direct routing, and direct routing would allow us to be able to integrate with any existing phone system, whether it be Cisco, Mitel, ShoreTel, those are the same now. Any phone system that's out there, we can connect up to it. We can integrate. We can even do things like 4-digit dial integration between the phone systems.
Cool. Susan also had a follow-up question too. It says, does Enterprise Microsoft E5 include calling?
So this is the fun part with the packages. E5 includes the phone system license, and it also includes audio conferencing. It does not include the domestic or the international calling plan. So that would be one piece that you would have to get. If you're on any of the E3 or M365 E3 or whatnot, then you have to add on the phone system as well as the domestic calling plan. But the E5s do include the phone system license.
Okay, good deal, good deal. And then there was one more. Can you share a voicemail to a channel? Question from Ben.
Yes, you can actually, and that's a very good question. You can share a voicemail to a team and to a channel, so you can do that.
Outstanding. Okay, well, these are great questions, so keep them coming as we go. Do you want to do any more demoing, or do you want to go back to talking about some of the capabilities?
Let's go back and talk about some of the capabilities, and if somebody wants to see some of those capabilities later, we can definitely bring it back up.
Okay, sounds good, sounds good.
All right.
I will say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was going to say, in my brain, it's still resonating the power of being able to do what you were saying to set up, was it the call group, where it can ring me for a certain amount of time and then it could jump to someone else. We have a lot of clients and customers that have like a manufacturing situation where they need to make a call, and if they don't get an answer, this is critical. They can't just hang up and try to figure it out, but to have a number they could dial and it could escalate for them, that could be pretty powerful.
Yep, very much so. So the call groups work kind of from an individual level. Where I see call groups used a lot is we have an executive who has 1 or 2 or 3 executive assistants. And the executive wants the phone to ring their desk first, but if they're not able to answer it, then their executive assistant one of them can answer that phone call. And that's where that work group or that call group becomes very powerful, because it gives us that capability to extend that call reach beyond a single individual and voicemail to other people that may be able to answer that call. Kind of moving that from an enterprise point of view, we also want to be able to handle incoming calls, right? We want to be able to have an incoming call go to our sales group, or maybe go to our marketing group, or be able to distinguish how we want that inbound call flow to occur. And we can do that within Microsoft Teams. We have 2 capabilities for incoming calls. First is an auto attendant. An auto attendant is what we've all seen, where you dial in and it says press 1 for customer support, press 2 for sales, press 3 for marketing. We have that capability to build those with auto attendants within Microsoft Teams. Little bit of a difference from other phone systems is that these auto attendants are voice enabled. It doesn't mean that you have to press 1 actually for customer support or press 2 for sales. You can actually just say customer support and it's going to go to customer support group. Or you can say sales and it's going to go to the sales group. So small, minor modification, but an important one, because it allows us to be able to use voice. The auto attendant also gives us the capability of doing a directory lookup. So we've all had that where, if you want Jacob Eker, please put in type in his last name, the first 3 letters of his last name. So type in EKE. Microsoft with the auto attendance provides that capability to do a directory lookup. Again, this is voice enabled. So all you have to say is, please find Jacob Eker, and it's going to automatically route the call to me. So it gives us that capability. We can still support, and I should say, you can still support the DTMF or pressing 1 for sales, pressing 2 for customer support. That's still there, but you have the added benefit of adding the voice capability as well. Okay. Call queues. Call queues give us the capability, and we talk about pressing 1 for customer support. That's going to go to a group of people, right? We may have 5 or 10 different people that answer the customer support line, and we want to direct how those calls get to those 5 people. That is what a call queue is for. Some phone systems call those hunt groups. Microsoft calls them call queues, but we have the capability of defining with that call queue, how do we want those calls to be answered by those 5 individuals that are part of our customer support? And by that, I mean, if we want it to go to Joe first, Mary second, Luis third, and so on, we can dictate that, and we can make that be the sequential order that we have. If we want it to ring all 5 at the same time, we can do that. If we want the inbound calls to be based on their presence, which we all love, then we can do that. If they're available, they're going to get the call. If they're busy, they're not going to get the call. So we have a lot of functions and a lot of capabilities that we can do within the auto attendance and call queues to be able to route that traffic the way that we want it to go. It gives us a lot of capabilities within there. We talked a little bit about call groups. The way that I try to distinguish call groups is very much from an individual perspective. Auto attendance and call queues are from the enterprise perspective. Okay, so we're defining auto attendance and call queues for the enterprise as a whole, not for one individual user. When we're doing it for an individual user, that's where we use a call group. Some other capabilities that we have from an enterprise level, call park. Call park is where if somebody calls in, somebody answers, we're not sure who that call should be routed to. So we park that call and we announce that Jacob is on line 5003. And anybody can go pick up 5003 and then be able to take over that call. So call park is a functionality that we have within Microsoft Teams as well. Another feature that we have within Teams from the enterprise voice perspective, I kind of touched on a bit, that I could forward my call from Teams to my cell phone. I also have the capability of changing my device that I'm using and doing it mid-call. So a lot of times within a call, I'll start with my headset because it's just me talking to another individual. Through the course of the conversation, I get to a point where I want to bring somebody else in that's in my office. I can't really share my headset with them. That becomes very difficult, and nobody really wants to share a headset anyway. What I can do is I can change from my headset to a personal speaker device that I have, or to the laptop speaker, and I can do that midstream in the call. And then I can invite other people to be physically in my room and be part of that call. So we have the ability to change the devices that we're using, which is a powerful piece to be able to use. Versus in other phone systems, you literally have to hang up the phone or you have to call that person in from their desk. So it ends up, again, it's a small feature that you add, but it's a very important one to save time and to save energy. So there's a lot of other capabilities within enterprise, but those are kind of the ones I wanted to touch on. I could talk on the features of Teams voice ad nauseum and people would be very tired, but those are the main ones that I wanted to be able to get through today, unless anybody has any questions within that.
No other questions in the Q&A at the moment, and I know I'm learning a whole lot here. I mean, this really just, to me, it just speaks volumes to the maturity of Microsoft having been in this business for as long as they have, whereas again, most people maybe don't really realize that, but some of the basic calling capabilities that we were just talking about at the beginning of the webinar, which you just kind of take for granted, that you can dial a number and you can receive calls and you get voicemail and you can see your call history. Those are all kind of the bare essentials you would expect, but these capabilities with call queues and auto attendance and call groups, I mean, that is really great enterprise class, organizational wide capabilities that they bring. And just to be really, really clear, as it says at the bottom, all of those features are included with your phone system licensing, Jacob?
That is correct. There is, for everything that we've talked about so far, there is no additional licensing. It's not, It's not one of those gotchas where you get the phone system, oh, you need to add call groups, oh, that's another license. You need to add auto attendance, oh, that's another license. Nope. Microsoft wanted this to be very simple. As long as you have that phone system license, then you have these capabilities automatically.
That's refreshing. I don't know how many times I've ever said ever in my career the word simple, Microsoft, and licensing in the same sentence.
Yeah, those don't usually go together at all. But yes, for this one, it absolutely is the case. We'll talk a little bit later about there is some additional features that do have some other licenses, but for these enterprise voice features, capabilities are available to everybody. No, there's nothing additional that's needed for that.
Wonderful.
Well, all this amazing software capabilities here in Teams for calling, and what do you really need at the end of the day when it comes to like physically in your hands to be able to take advantage of all these calling capabilities?
Well, the reality is you can get by with a Teams client on a laptop and the speaker and the microphone that comes onto that laptop. You absolutely could do that. If you want to have a better voice experience, I do recommend getting some devices that may be able to help within that. For those that want to use their PC as their phone, something as simple as a headset like this can be used. There are devices that are certified, headset devices that are certified by Microsoft to be Teams compliant. And what that really means is they have HD audio, they have noise cancellation, they've been tested with Teams, and they're going to provide a better experience for the end users. The reality is pretty much anything on a hardware compatibility list, as far as microphone and speakers, can be used with Microsoft Teams. I see a lot of people using the Apple headsets, the Apple devices, and using those as their endpoint device for Microsoft Teams. It works.
Yeah.
From an end user perspective, yes, we can use the headsets, we can use the speaker pucks that I've talked about, we can use any device that's there. There are going to be people always in every voice deployment that simply want to have a phone on their desk. They want it to be separate from their computer. They want to be able to pick up that handset. They want to have the speaker phone within it, and they like dialing those numbers. And you know what? That's okay. There's a lot of actual phones that can be used with Microsoft Teams. There's a bunch of different manufacturers, there's different styles, there's color screens, there's non-color screens. So you can incorporate a physical phone for people to have at their desk if they want to. My personal preference, I have a phone on my desk. It's sat there for the last 3 years. I think it has more dust than actual usage. But I also have users in my office who are in that mode that they have that they've wanted to have a phone on their desk and they want to have that there, and that's perfectly fine. We can support and allow for either of those. So for the users specifically, headsets, handsets, a lot of options. Personal speaker devices, we call them speaker pucks because they look like a puck. Those all work and they're great from a personal perspective for that. Once we get beyond the users themselves, now we're getting into some of the advanced features that Teams can provide, and that's coming into the group workspaces. We do have devices that you can put up that's an integrated monitor with a video and speaker device, and you can draw on it and you can share that with everybody within a Teams meeting. Wonderful, wonderful devices to be able to use. You have room systems which incorporate the audio, they incorporate the video, you can get very elaborate with them. And you can have, an entire board level conference room integrated with Microsoft Teams to be able to put up there. So there are solutions for everything from the small little huddle room all the way to the corporate boardroom to be able to integrate with Microsoft Teams and to be able to get all of this functionality that we're talking about. So everything from, a small, simple headset all the way to the board level room, there's a solution for it. I guarantee there's something out there for it.
Outstanding. We did have another question that came in, if now's an okay time to
Sure.
Drop this in. It's actually kind of a multi-part question. First part is, how does Teams calling handle 911 calling for locations? At manufacturing locations, the local 911 call center requests locations of numbers, phones on the property to direct EMT to the location of the issue. And then the second part of that question is, how would this work if you transfer a Teams call to your mobile device?
That's a good one. So let me start with the first part of this. 911 absolutely is supported and actually required by the FCC. So you have to have the 911 capability. At the very basic level, you can have a one-to-one mapping for each user where you establish a static address for the user, and that allows for emergency services to be able to get to them. Teams also supports what's called Nomadic E911, which means that if you have a campus location or you have multiple locations and somebody may be working from location 1 today, maybe working from location 2 tomorrow, location 3, you guys get the idea. Based on the IP address or based on the location they're coming from, it will update the 911 when you call and give the actual address. That does require the direct routing functionality that we talked about, and we will talk about in another webinar sometime soon, but it does require that to be able to get that Nomadic 911 capability. So Microsoft, again, has to comply with the FCC. They have to provide 911 capability. You have that capability to be able to get to national at the very least, but more than likely you're gonna put an address in for the user. You're gonna get to a regional, and if you use that Nomadic, then you're gonna get to local PSAP to be able to get that 911 capabilities. And I'm sorry, Richard, that was multi-part. I think I only answered one part of that.
The other half was just simply, how would this work if you transfer a Teams call to your mobile device?
Teams call to your mobile device. So if this part gets a little bit tricky, so let me explain what I mean by that. If you go from Teams and you transfer to the actual cell phone number, then that call is now part of your cell carrier provider. So that is governed by the cell carrier. If you take over that call and you move from, let's say, a headset, and you go to the Teams client on your mobile device with audio, now that is still a Teams call. Okay, so it's now not going over your cell carrier, it's now still using Teams. So it's an extension. Consider it another device and you're just extending it to your mobile device.
Good deal.
The next part. How can Teams calling make my life better? One of the best benefits that I think Teams voice gives me is that my enterprise voice, my direct inward dial number, my phone number, follows me wherever I have Teams. So I have Teams client on my mobile device. It can ring my mobile device if somebody calls my number. I have it on my laptop. So if I'm at Starbucks, I can send and receive calls while I'm sitting at Starbucks. If I have a web browser at a airport kiosk, I can absolutely get my voice communication on that web browser at that web browser at the airport. So anywhere where I can log into Teams, voice follows. And that can be a benefit. And for some people, yes, maybe it can be somewhat of a curse. And for that, I just say log out of Teams to be able to not have it. But one of the big advantages that I see for organizations where we've put Teams voice in place is they've been giving out their cell phone number to people as a business line. Mm-hmm. And that can lead to some complexities that we don't really want to have. First of all, is your identity your cell phone number, or is your identity your business? With Microsoft Teams, I don't have to give out my cell phone number anymore. That cell phone number is reserved for me to give to whom I want. I don't have to give it out as part of the business. Doesn't mean you don't have the capability. There's a lot of people that use their cell and that is their identity for business, and that's fine. But if I'm giving out a business number and I'm giving out my actual DID, that follows me wherever I have Teams again. So I don't have to give my cell phone anymore. So it really goes to the second point on this slide, which is flexibility, right? I have choices. I have options. I can give my Teams number. I can give my cell number. I can choose whether I'm logged in. I can choose to be able to get those calls wherever I'm at, as long as I have an internet connection, and I can have that capability to do so. Going a little bit further and expanding a bit, when we look at Teams and we have that enterprise voice, it means that Teams really truly is a full unified communication solution. We have the instant messaging capability. We have the conferencing capability, whether web conferencing or audio conferencing. We can turn it into a voice bridge. We have the file sharing capability. We now have, and we've actually always had, that enterprise voice solution that we can incorporate into it. So all of that comes into one client, one capability, and gives us that functionality right there at our fingertips.
You know, it makes me sad we didn't have this webinar a year and a half ago. I have more than one client that was outlining scenarios that they went through during the push to work from home last year, where they were creating schedules where users could, if they wanted to, go back to the office and get their desktop phones to bring home. They needed their phone. Some people, they went into a rotating schedule. You know, they had their days they worked from their home office and their days that they worked from their office, and they were carting laptops, some of them monitors, and desktop phones back and forth.
Yep.
The ability to have that with you, especially going into, many of us are going to be looking at a hybrid work model, which Richard and I have talked about in a previous webinar or two. It's going to be a different kind of world for a lot of people, and the ability to have that business phone, regardless of where your desk is that day, or if we go back to being road warriors, please, I'm so ready to be a road warrior again. That business number is now with me everywhere I go. Like you said, we have to turn it off sometimes, and that's a new skill that we're having to learn in this new world. But that's amazing to have that capability.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine hauling a phone out, a physical phone out of an office, plugging it at home to be able to get that functionality, knowing that we have Teams voice capability to be able to provide that.
What about for our administrators here on this call? What are so hone in on some of the things that they can have, to make the case for using Teams calling in their organization?
Sure. Well, the first and obvious one that usually comes up when we talk about Teams voice is, what are the costs involved with this? And what I find is the vast majority of the time putting in Teams voice actually is a cost reduction for the organization, because we don't have the hardware that's required within it. We don't have software. We don't have maintenance agreements that come into it or contracts. We don't have support contracts with an organization to be able to help us do adds, changes, deletes, whatever else. It means that we, again, using the word simplify, we've simplified some of the architecture and some of the costs that come with it. So it makes it that much easier to do. Talking a little bit about administration. All of the administration for Teams Enterprise Voice is in the exact same Teams admin center that we use for Office 365. So we can provision phones, we can provision auto attendants, we can provision voicemail, we can do all of that from the same admin console that we use for Office 365, which means that we don't have to necessarily have a separate group that does the voice solution that's separate apart from the group that does Office 365. Those can be the same individuals, because it really is and should be that easy to provision a phone, right? So it gives us a lot of capabilities within that. Licensing. We've already kind of talked about what licensing is needed. The licensing is managed in the exact same place that our Office 365 licenses are maintained. So we add in the phone system license, or to somebody that was on here, we have an E5, we assign that out, we assign domestic calling plan, we're now ready to be able to give voice to that individual. One of the others, especially for organizations that have different needs for different users, and look at it this way, I may have users that need to have the ability to do local calls. I have a separate set of users that needs to have local long distance, and I may even still have a separate group that has international capabilities. I can define policies within Teams to be able to give those rights to the users. So it does allow us to be able to fine tune the rights and the capabilities that you have within Enterprise Voice based on the policies that we assign. So again, all of that is in one place. All of that is within the Office 365 admin, and really in this case, the Teams admin center. So it gives us a lot of capabilities to streamline that administration that normally right now we'd either have to call out to another organization, or we'd have to get to our voice group to be able to do so.
It's just a ton of value there from the administrative side. And then what about, clearly, as pretty much everybody in an organization that has a need for a phone, what are some of those things that are valuable to them as well?
Well, valuable to them is kind of what we've talked about already, is the fact that we're incorporating yet another component within Microsoft Teams. They're already using that for instant messaging. They're using it for chat. We're extending that capability to add one more modality, to add that voice capability into the equation. And not just for a peer-to-peer call, but for everything, for inbound calls, outbound calls, et cetera. It's one client. It used to be that Outlook was the primary client that everybody had open on their desktop. And that was number one in many organizations. What I'm seeing, especially once we get into all the different modalities that Teams has, and especially once we include the voice, is that Teams is supplanting Microsoft Outlook as the primary client, because it becomes the primary communication mechanism for users. Adding this voice piece, especially for users that already have Teams, you guys already saw it's one button to be able to add and to be able to get that 10-digit dial pad. It's not a difficult thing to learn. It's very much easier for users that have already been using Teams to be able to extend that, to be able to include that enterprise voice. No longer do we have to go send somebody to Teams training and then send them to voice training for the phone system, because they're all part of the same solution. And like we talked about, having the business phone follow you wherever you want it to follow you, I should say, is an important perspective. So for a business user, this really is streamlining, and it's making their lives easier to be able to do so.
That's amazing. So for those that are sold on the idea that this is where we need to go as an organization, any tips on ways that they can convince management that, this is what we need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about some very cool capabilities, and technology is always fun. It has a lot of great capabilities. It provides us a lot of toys, I called them earlier in the presentation. But when you're talking to management, you're talking to executives, they don't care how cool the tools are. Really, I learned early on that they're worried about two things. One is, how can I reduce cost? And the second one is, how can I improve efficiencies, which in a roundabout way comes back to, how do I reduce costs?
Yeah.
And when we talk to executives about this, we do highlight the fact that we are reducing costs. We look at the licensing, we look at the hardware, we look at the components that tie into this. It absolutely can be a cost savings to an organization just within those components. Once we add in the efficiencies we get through administration, which we just talked about, for the end users using the same Teams client that they've been using, and incorporating another aspect and tying all that into one client, we're now reducing the amount of time and the amount of effort that people spend on a day-by-day basis. And that all of that goes into the efficiencies that they gain, that they can use for their daily purposes, instead of functioning within multiple tool sets. So it really, really helps within that to be able to provide that. And really, when it comes to talking to management about what this is function for, talk to us. Richard, Joy, talk to them, talk to PEI. We can absolutely, yes, Joy, call me. We can absolutely help you talk to the executives on this, because it's a conversation that, truthfully, I've probably had every single week since before COVID, but absolutely during COVID. We know what they're looking for, and we know how to tailor this to what they need, and why to justify this.
This is the slide I joked we needed to have the call me GIF, because it's like it's hard to have these conversations sometimes, but when you can bring in the folks been there, done that numerous times, then for a variety of reasons, sometimes it helps to call in somebody to have that conversation. It's like from The Legend of Zelda, it's dangerous to go alone. And Jacob, I mean, there's no one else I'd rather take into a Teams calling conversation than you, because obviously, not only have you done it a million times, it's something you're passionate about. It's like you could probably sit down and talk about this all day long and into tomorrow if you wanted to. So.
Probably can, and admittedly probably have. Yes, this is definitely a passion area for me, because I want everybody to be able to see the capability and see the function, and to be able to use it. It's a tool set that I think everybody should have.
It just makes sense for sure. And as I believe we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there's a lot to unpack inside of Teams calling. So if you want to know more, if you have some big questions that we didn't quite get to, feedback, please let us know. We've got our contact information up on the screen. Reach out, let us know, because we are preparing to have a Teams calling journey with our webinar series. We're going to be sprinkling them in here and there. So there's more to come. This is not the end by any means of Jacob coming and imparting his wisdom and knowledge about Teams calling for us. Jacob, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was wonderful.
You are most welcome, and I'm more than happy to keep talking about Teams voice and the next part, whether that be direct routing or some other aspect of it.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Most definitely. And we are at time. If you have any other questions, please do feel free to go ahead and drop those in chat. Otherwise, thank you for taking time out of your day. I know it's a hectic world we're living in, and we appreciate you taking time with us today. And we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Everyone.